Welcome to Educational Bedtime, where history unfolds gently in the quiet hours. If you find these stories help you drift into peaceful sleep, consider subscribing to join us on more journeys through time. Tonight, we're traveling to the vast steppes of medieval Mongolia, to a world where survival meant adapting to one of history's most demanding military machines. Close your eyes and imagine yourself transported 8 centuries into the past, to a landscape that stretches endlessly beneath an enormous sky. Here, the wind carries the scent of grass and dust, the distant sound of horses, and the echoes of an empire that would reshape the world. This is the realm of the Mongols, where ordinary people lived extraordinary lives of hardship and endurance, where a single man's ambition would create the largest land empire in human history. Tonight's journey will take us through 4 distinct worlds within this vast empire. We'll begin by experiencing the harsh realities of life as a Mongol warrior, feeling the cold bite of the steppe wind, and tasting the sour tang of fermented mare's milk. Then we'll follow the remarkable rise of Temujin, the abandoned child who became Genghis Khan, master of millions. Our path will lead us through the mysteries hidden in the secret history of the Mongols, where archaeological discoveries continue to reveal surprising truths about this remarkable civilization. Finally, we'll step into the opulent world of the Great Khan's court, where luxury and power created a stark contrast to the harsh life of the common soldier. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare to journey across time and space to a world where survival demanded everything, and where the rhythm of hoofbeats on endless grass marked the pulse of an empire that touched every corner of the known world. Chapter 1: Sweat, Ice and Steppe, Life as a Mongol Warrior. The darkness before dawn is absolute on the steppe. No city lights, no gentle glow of civilization, just the vast dome of stars above, and the endless grass beneath. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air, and you can feel the dampness that has settled on your clothes during the night. The felt walls around you offer little protection against the bitter cold that seeps through every gap, every imperfection in the ancient weaving. Imagine yourself as a Mongol warrior in the early 13th century. Your body knows this routine intimately. The pre-dawn stirring, the immediate alertness that comes from months of campaign life. The felt tent around you, called a jur, has been your home for weeks now. But home is a fluid concept when you're part of Genghis Khan's army. Home is wherever the horses stop, wherever the Khan's banner is planted for the night. Your first task, before you even fully wake, is to check on your horses. In the Mongol world, a warrior without horses is no warrior at all. Each soldier maintains a string of 4 to 6 horses, rotating between them, to ensure none becomes too exhausted. You stumble outside into the bitter cold, your legs already aching from yesterday's ride. The temperature has dropped well below freezing during the night, and the ground beneath your feet cracks with frost. Your breath steams in the early morning air, creating small clouds that dissipate quickly in the dry atmosphere. The horses stand close together, their thick winter coats covered in a delicate layer of frost that sparkles in the starlight. Their breath creates larger clouds than your own, and you can hear the soft snorting and shifting as they sense your approach. You run your hands along their flanks, checking for injuries, feeling for swelling or heat that might indicate lameness. These animals are your lifeline, your weapons, your transportation, and often your shelter. They're small by modern standards, standing perhaps 14 hands high, but they're incredibly hardy. These are the descendants of wild horses that learn to survive the brutal steppe winters, animals that can dig through snow to find grass, that can survive on scrub vegetation that would kill a more delicate breed. You've learned to read their moods, to understand their needs, because your survival depends entirely on their health and willingness to carry you across the vast distances of the campaign. The relationship between Mongol and horse goes deeper than mere utility. These animals become extensions of your own body, responding to the slightest shift in weight, the smallest pressure from your knees. In battle, when your life depends on split-second decisions, this bond can mean the difference between victory and death. Your breakfast arrives as the first pale light begins to touch the eastern horizon. It's arig, fermented mare's milk, served in a leather cup that's been used by countless warriors before you. The cup itself tells a story worn smooth by thousands of hands, darkened by years of use and the oils of many meals. The taste of the arig is sour and alcoholic, with a consistency that's somewhere between milk and yogurt. To modern palates, it would be nearly undrinkable, but to you it's sustenance. nutrition, and sometimes the only liquid available for days. The fermentation process preserves the milk during long journeys, and the slight alcohol content provides calories and a small buffer against the psychological toll of constant hardship. The mare's milk itself is richer in vitamins than cow's milk, particularly vitamin C, which helps prevent scurvy during the long months when fresh vegetation is unavailable. This nutritional knowledge, passed down through generations of nomadic peoples, allows the Mongol army to remain healthy in conditions that would devastate other military forces. The cold is your constant companion. Even in summer, the steppe nights can be surprisingly chill, but in winter the temperature plummets to levels that would kill the unprepared. The continental climate of the Mongolian plateau creates temperature extremes that test human endurance to its limits. Winter temperatures can drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, while summer days might reach over 100 degrees. You've learnt to sleep in layers, wearing your felt coat, your leather boots, even your hat. The Mongol deal, the traditional long robe, becomes your blanket, your protection against wind, your camouflage when you need to blend with the landscape. Alongside the arag, you might have a piece of dried meat, as hard as leather and nearly as difficult to chew. This is your protein, preserved without salt or spices, tasting of nothing but the animal it came from, and the smoke used to dry it. The meat might be from sheep, goats, or horses, depending on what was available when the army last had time to process their livestock. Sometimes, if you're fortunate, there might be a handful of dried curds, made from the milk of sheep or goats. These are treasures, providing essential nutrients, and a change from the monotonous diet of mare's milk and dried meat. The thick felt and leather offer some protection against the elements, but comfort is a luxury you've learned to live without. Your body has adapted to this life in ways that would seem impossible to those who live in settled communities. Your legs are permanently bowed from spending most of your life in the saddle, a physical transformation that marks you as a child of the steppe. Your hands are cracked and weathered from handling reins in all weather, scarred by the sharp edges of weapons and tools. Your back aches constantly from sleeping on hard ground, and long hours bent over your horse's neck. Your eyes have learned to scan vast distances, picking out movement on the horizon that might indicate game, enemies, or the rest of your army. This ability to read the landscape, to notice the subtle signs that reveal the presence of other living things, is a skill that takes years to develop. A distant cloud of dust might indicate an approaching army. The flight pattern of birds might reveal the location of water. The behavior of your horses might warn of predators or storms. The routine of breaking camp begins before the sun fully rises. Everything must be portable. Everything must be efficient. Your chair comes apart in a matter of minutes. The felt walls rolled and tied. The lattice framework collapsed and loaded onto pack animals. If this efficiency is the result of generations of nomadic life, where the ability to move quickly might mean the difference between life and death. Every piece of equipment has its place, every task its assigned person. The entire army can be ready to move in less time than it takes a settled person to prepare breakfast. Your personal possessions fit into a single saddlebag, a spare bowstring, a whetstone for your arrowheads, perhaps a small bronze mirror, a few personal items that connect you to family members you may not see for months or years. These few objects represent everything you own in the world, yet they also represent freedom. Unlike the settled peoples you sometimes encounter, you're not tied down by accumulations of property. You can move with the seasons, follow the grass, adapt to changing circumstances with a flexibility that gives the Mongol army its greatest advantage. The weapons you carry are the result of centuries of refinement by steppe peoples. Your composite bow is a marvel of engineering, made from horn, sinew, and wood, capable of sending an arrow accurately over distances that would challenge modern firearms. The construction of such a bow requires months of careful work and the knowledge of master craftsmen who understand the precise properties of each material. The horn comes from the interior curve of wild sheep or yak horns, providing compression strength. The sinew taken from the backs of deer or cattle provides tensile strength. The wood, usually birch or maple, provides the flexible core that holds everything together. Your bow requires constant maintenance. The sinew must be kept dry, or it will lose its elasticity. The wood must be treated against cracking. The horn must be carefully shaped and fitted. You know this bow intimately, understanding its moods and capabilities, as well as you know your horses. In dry weather, it shoots harder and faster. In wet weather, it becomes sluggish and unreliable. The draw weight of your bow, perhaps 150 pounds, requires constant practice to maintain the strength necessary to use it effectively. Your arrows are works of art in their own right. Each one is handcrafted, the shaft carefully selected for straightness and weight, the point forged from iron and honed to razor sharpness. Different arrows serve different purposes, some for hunting, others for warfare, some designed to penetrate armor, others to cause maximum damage to unprotected flesh. You carry perhaps 30 arrows in your quiver, and each one represents hours of careful craftsmanship. The fletching, made from eagle or goose feathers, is attached with sinew and sealed with pine pitch. The nocks are carved to fit your bowstring precisely, ensuring consistent release and accuracy. The arrowheads themselves tell a story of metallurgical sophistication. The Mongols learned iron working from Chinese and Persian craftsmen, developing techniques for creating steel that was both hard and flexible. The points are carefully shaped for their intended purpose. Bodkin points for penetrating mail armor, broadheads for hunting and causing massive tissue damage, fire arrows with specially designed heads that can carry burning material to enemy fortifications. The saber at your side is shorter than European swords, curved for slashing attacks from horseback. Its edge is kept sharp enough to shave with, because a dull blade in combat means death. You've learnt to fight with this weapon, while controlling your horse with your knees and weight shifts, a skill that takes years to master and constant practice to maintain. The curved blade is ideally suited for the type of warfare favored by the Mongols, allowing devastating cuts while riding past an enemy, without the need to stop and engage in prolonged combat. The steel of your saber comes from the finest smiths in the empire, men who understand the secrets of folding and tempering metal to create blades that are both sharp and durable. The handle is wrapped in leather for a secure grip, even when your hands are wet with sweat or blood. The scabbard is made from wood covered in leather, with bronze fittings that protect the blade, while allowing quick deployment when needed. As the army begins to move, you take your position. In the vast formation, the discipline is absolute. Every warrior knows his place. Every unit moves in coordination with the others. The dust kicked up by thousands of horses creates a cloud that can be seen for miles, a visible testament to the size and power of the force. You ride in this dust, breathing it, tasting it, feeling it settle in your clothes and hair and eyes. The dust becomes part of you, coating everything you own, filling your nostrils, creating a constant reminder of the army's presence. The pace of the march is relentless. Mongol armies could cover distances that seemed impossible to their enemies, sometimes traveling over 100 miles in a single day. This wasn't done at a gallop, but at a sustainable pace that took advantage of the multiple horses each warrior maintained. You would ride one horse hard for several hours, then switch to a fresh mount, allowing the first to recover, while continuing the advance. This system, known as the arrow messenger relay, when applied to military movement, gave the Mongols a strategic mobility that their enemies could never match. The landscape around you is both beautiful and terrifying in its vastness. Steppe stretches to every horizon, an ocean of grass that changes color with the seasons and the light. In spring, it's green and lush, dotted with wildflowers that create a carpet of color, stretching beyond the limits of vision. In summer, it turns golden and harsh, shimmering with heat waves that distort the distance, making navigation challenging even for experienced riders. In autumn, it becomes brown and brittle, crackling underfoot, releasing the sweet scent of dried grass that will sustain the horses through the coming winter. In winter, it disappears entirely under snow, becoming a white desert where landmarks vanish, and navigation becomes a matter of life and death. Navigation itself is an art that few master completely. There are no roads, no permanent settlements to guide you. Instead, you learn to read the subtle signs of the landscape, the way water flows, indicating the slope of the land, the direction of prevailing winds, which can be felt even when they're too light to see their effects. The patterns of stars that wheel overhead become as familiar as the faces of your comrades. You develop an almost supernatural sense of direction, an ability to maintain course across trackless wastes that would confuse and disorient those from settled lands. The Mongols developed sophisticated techniques for navigation, including the use of shadow clocks during the day and star charts for nighttime travel. They understood the relationship between wind patterns and seasonal changes, allowing them to predict weather and plan their movements accordingly. The most experienced guides could navigate by the smell of the wind, the behavior of animals, or the subtle differences in the grass and soil that indicated their location on the vast steppe. The social structure of the army is rigid and unforgiving. You are part of a decimal system that organizes everything from the smallest patrol to the largest campaign. 10 warriors form an arban. 10 arbans form a jagun of 100 men. 10 jaguns form a mingan of 1,000, and 10 mingans form a tumen of 10,000. Each level has its commander, its responsibilities, its chain of command that reaches all the way up to the Khan himself. This system, adapted from ancient steppe traditions, but refined by Genghis Khan's organizational genius, creates a military structure that can respond quickly to commands and adapt to changing circumstances. Your position in this hierarchy is determined by merit, not birth. This is revolutionary in a world where nobles inherit their power and commoners are born to serve. In the Mongol army, a shepherd's son can rise to command thousands if he proves himself capable. Conversely, incompetence or cowardice can result in demotion or death, regardless of family connections. This meritocracy creates a fierce competition for advancement, driving warriors to achieve feats that would be impossible under other systems. The promotion system encourages innovation and initiative. A warrior who develops new tactics or shows exceptional bravery in battle might find himself elevated to command positions that would take years to achieve in other armies. This system also ensures that commands are given by men who understand warfare from personal experience, rather than by nobles who inherited their positions but never faced the reality of combat. The justice of the army is swift and harsh. Desertion means death, not just for the deserter, but potentially for his entire unit. This collective responsibility ensures that warriors police each other, creating a system of mutual accountability that prevents the breakdown of discipline. Cowardice in battle results in immediate execution, carried out by the warrior's own comrades. Failure to follow orders regardless of the circumstances can result in severe punishment, but the system also protects you. Those who serve faithfully are rewarded, fed, and cared for. The wounded are not abandoned, they are carried by their comrades and tended by the army's healers. The army's medical system, though primitive by modern standards, was advanced for its time. Mongol healers combined traditional steppe remedies with medical knowledge gained from conquered territories. They understood the use of herbs for treating wounds, the importance of keeping injuries clean, and the value of rest and nutrition in recovery. The Chinese medical techniques, Persian surgical knowledge, and traditional Mongol shamanic healing were all integrated into a system that kept the army fighting fit. The psychological toll of this life is immense. You are constantly aware that death walks beside you. Disease can strike without warning, killing strong warriors in days or hours. Dysentery, typhus, and other epidemic diseases spread quickly through the close quarters of army life. Battle injuries can leave you crippled or disfigured, forever changed by moments of violence that last only seconds but echo through a lifetime. The weather can kill you if you're caught unprepared, or if your horses fail. Sudden storms on the steppe can bring blizzards that last for days, trapping men and animals in conditions where survival becomes a matter of pure chance. The isolation of the steppe can drive men to madness. Surrounded by vast emptiness and the constant presence of violent death, some warriors develop what modern medicine would recognize as post-traumatic stress, becoming unable to sleep, jumping at sudden sounds, or losing the ability to form close relationships with their comrades. The Mongol army dealt with these problems through a combination of practical measures and traditional healing practices. Warriors showing signs of mental distress might be given different duties, or sent to serve with the shamans, who understood the spiritual dimensions of trauma. Yet there is also a strange beauty to this existence: the freedom of the open steppe, the camaraderie of your unit, the pride in belonging to an army that is conquering the world. These things provide meaning and purpose that many settled peoples lack. You are part of something larger than yourself, something that is reshaping the world through its passage. The courage of your comrades, the skill of your leaders, the sense of destiny that drives the entire enterprise, creates a bond that transcends the hardships and gives meaning to the sacrifices. The nights on campaign are times of both rest and preparation. Around small fires, warriors maintain their equipment, tell stories, and plan for the next day's march. The conversations are often practical: which horses are showing signs of lameness, where the next water source might be found, rumors about the enemy's movements. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before sleep, the talk turns to home, to families left behind, to the lives they might return to if they survive the campaign. These evening gatherings serve important social functions. They maintain morale during difficult periods, provide opportunities for the sharing of information, and reinforce the bonds between warriors that are essential for effective combat. The stories told around these fires become part of the oral tradition of the army, preserving the memory of great battles, heroic deeds, and fallen comrades. The Mongols had a rich tradition of storytelling that served both entertainment and educational purposes, passing down tactical knowledge and cultural values through narrative. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and light. Even exhausted warriors must remain alert for the possibility of night attacks, stampedes, or storms. You've learned to sleep with one hand on your weapons, to wake at the slightest unusual sound. Your dreams, when they come, are often of home, of warm hearths, soft beds, and the faces of people you love. But dawn always comes too soon, bringing another day of riding, another day of survival in this harsh and beautiful world. The relationship between warrior and horse becomes something deeper than mere utility. Your horses learn to respond to the slightest shift in your weight, the smallest pressure from your legs. They become extensions of your will, capable of carrying you through battles where a moment's hesitation means death. In return, you care for them with a devotion that outsiders might find surprising. You check their hooves for stones, massage their legs after hard rides, share your water when it's scarce, and mourn deeply when age or injury finally claims them. The horses themselves are remarkable animals, bred for thousands of years, for the specific demands of steppe warfare. They can survive on poor forage, endure extreme temperatures, and maintain their strength and speed under conditions that would kill more pampered breeds. The Mongol warhorse can carry a fully armed warrior at high speed for hours, then be ready for another charge after only a brief rest. These animals live in close partnership with their riders, sleeping in the same areas, sharing the same hardships, and developing an almost telepathic understanding of each other's needs and intentions. The daily care of horses involves skills that take years to master. You must understand their anatomy, recognizing the early signs of lameness or illness. You must know how to treat minor injuries, when to rest an animal, and when to push forward, how to manage their diet to maintain their strength throughout long campaigns. The Mongols developed sophisticated veterinary techniques, including surgical procedures for treating arrow wounds, herbal remedies for various ailments, and methods for managing breeding to maintain the quality of their horse herds. This is the world of the Mongol warrior, a life of constant motion, ever-present danger, and survival earned through skill, endurance, and an intimate knowledge of the harsh realities of the steppe. It is a life that would challenge the strongest modern person, an existence that demanded everything and gave back only the satisfaction of belonging to something greater than oneself. The physical demands alone would be overwhelming to most contemporary people, but the psychological challenges, the constant awareness of mortality, the need to function effectively while living with chronic stress and discomfort would be even more difficult to endure. Yet from this harsh foundation, the Mongols built the largest land empire in human history. The discipline, endurance, and skills that we've just experienced were the tools that allowed them to conquer territories from Eastern Europe to the Pacific Ocean. The warrior whose life we've shared, sleeping on frozen ground, eating dried meat and fermented milk, would go on to participate in battles that decided the fate of nations, in campaigns that reshaped the political map of 3 continents. As we move forward in our journey tonight, we'll discover how one man emerged from this harsh world to unite the fractious tribes of Mongolia and create an empire that would span continents. The discipline, endurance, and skills that we've just experienced were the foundation upon which Genghis Khan would build his conquest of the world. The transformation from simple herder to world conqueror required not just personal genius and ambition, but the collective strength and skill of warriors like the one we've just encountered, men who could endure any hardship, overcome any obstacle, and remain loyal to their leaders and their cause, even in the face of death itself. Chapter 2. The birth of an empire. Genghis Khan's rise from outcast to world conqueror. As we transition from the harsh realities of warrior life to the story of the man who would unite these fierce tribes, let your mind drift to the beginning of the 12th century. The Mongolia you've just experienced was a fractured land where tribal loyalty meant everything and survival depended on the strength of your clan. Into this world of constant warfare and shifting allegiances was born a child who would change the course of human history. The transformation we are about to witness, from abandoned outcast to universal ruler, represents one of the most remarkable ascents to power in all of recorded history. The boy who would become Genghis Khan entered the world around 1162, though the exact date remains lost to time. He was born Temujin, named after a Tatar chieftain his father had recently defeated in battle. According to the secret history of the Mongols, he was born clutching a blood clot in his right hand, a sign that shamans interpreted as a portent of future greatness. That the birth took place near the sacred mountain of Burkan Khaldun, beside the Onon River, in a region that would later become the heartland of his empire. The prophecies mean little when you're a child struggling to survive in one of the world's most unforgiving environments. Picture the Mongolia of Temujin's youth, not yet the unified empire we associate with the Mongol name, but a patchwork of competing tribes locked in endless cycles of raid and revenge. The Borjigin, Temujin's clan, were part of the larger Mongol confederation, but they were neither the most powerful nor the most secure. Above them in the complex hierarchy of the steppes were the Karates, Christian Turkic people who controlled much of central Mongolia under their leader, Togrul. To the south were the Tatars, traditional enemies who had long made war against Mongol tribes, poisoning their leaders and raiding their herds with impunity. In the west were the Merkits, another Mongol group with their own ambitions for dominance over the fractured steppes. The political landscape of 12th century Mongolia was incredibly complex, with dozens of tribes and sub-tribes forming temporary alliances that shifted with each season. The Naimans controlled the western regions and claimed descent from ancient Turkic royalty. The Toyechurd were closely related to Temujin's clan, but had developed into bitter rivals over questions of succession and leadership. Smaller groups like the Ongirat, Ikirez, and Suldus moved between larger confederations, seeking protection and advantage in the constantly changing balance of power. This fragmentation made the steppes vulnerable to external enemies, particularly the Jin dynasty of northern China, which played different tribes against each other to prevent any single group from becoming too powerful. Temujin's father, Yasuge, was a minor chieftain, respected but not particularly powerful. He had built his modest position through the traditional means of steppe politics, strategic marriages, successful raids, and careful alliances with stronger neighbors. Yasuge's most important alliance was with Togrul, the powerful Khan of the Karates, a relationship that would prove crucial to his son's future survival. The Karates were Christians, having adopted the faith through contact with Nestorian missionaries centuries earlier, and their kingdom represented one of the most stable and prosperous powers on the steppes. Togrul himself was an experienced leader who had survived numerous challenges to his authority and understood the value of maintaining alliances with rising Mongol clans. Yasuge had 3 wives, as was common among Mongol chieftains of his status. Temujin's mother, Hualun, had actually been kidnapped from the Merkits, an act that would have lasting consequences for the family's future. This abduction, while considered normal by the standards of steppe warfare, created a blood feud that would pursue Temujin throughout his youth. Hualun herself was a remarkable woman, descended from a noble Mongol lineage, and possessed of the intelligence and strength that would later characterize her famous son. She had already given birth to several children when Temujin was born, including Bekta and Belgute, who would play important roles in the coming struggles for survival. The defining moment of Temujin's early life came when he was just 9 years old. His father had arranged a marriage alliance with the Ungarat tribe, a powerful confederation that controlled important grazing lands and trade routes. This was not unusual. Marriages among steppe peoples were primarily political arrangements designed to cement alliances and ensure the peaceful transfer of goods and people between tribes. Yasuge left young Temujin with his future in-laws, as was customary, allowing the boy to learn the customs and expectations of his bride's family. This arrangement also served as a form of hostage exchange, ensuring that both families would honor their commitments. On the journey home from arranging this marriage, Yasuge stopped to share a meal with some Tatars he encountered on the steppe. The laws of hospitality demanded that travelers be fed and sheltered, regardless of tribal affiliations, but old enmities ran deep in the complex world of steppe politics. The Tatars recognized Yasuge and secretly poisoned his food, using a slow-acting toxin that would not immediately reveal their treachery. This act of murder, disguised as hospitality, reflected the bitter hatred that existed between the Mongols and their traditional enemies. Yasuge made it home, but the poison worked slowly through his system, causing increasingly severe symptoms over several days. As he lay dying, he called for his son, but Temujin was too far away to reach his father's bedside. The journey from the Ungirat lands took several days even at the fastest pace, and by the time messengers could reach him and he could return, his father was already dead. When the boy finally arrived, he found his world fundamentally changed. In the harsh reality of steppe politics, a dead chieftain's family often found themselves abandoned by their followers, who would seek protection under stronger leaders rather than risk their own survival for the sake of loyalty to the deceased. This abandonment was not simply callous, but reflected the practical realities of nomadic life. Followers needed protection, access to grazing lands, and leadership in both war and peace. A widow with young children could not provide the military leadership necessary to defend against raids, or the political connections required to maintain alliances with other tribes. The decision to abandon Yasuge's family, led by a man named Targudai, was calculated and inevitable, given the unforgiving nature of steppe survival. Hulin and her children were left to fend for themselves on the unforgiving steppe. Imagine the desperation of this moment, a woman alone with several small children, cast out from the only protection they had known, facing the prospect of starvation or death from exposure. They had lost not only their social position and protection, but also most of their livestock, their primary source of food and wealth. The few animals that remained were barely sufficient to sustain them through even a single harsh winter. The family's gear was old and worn, providing minimal protection against the brutal weather that would soon arrive. Hulin proved to be a remarkable woman, possessed of the strength and intelligence that would later characterize her famous son. She gathered her children and a few loyal servants who chose to remain with the family, and together they retreated to the remote shores of the Onon River. Here, in one of the most desolate regions of the steppe, they began the desperate fight for survival that would shape Temujin's character and worldview for the rest of his life. This period of hardship lasted for several years, during which the family lived on the very edge of subsistence, learning skills and developing resilience that would prove crucial in later years. The years that followed were marked by poverty so severe that it bordered on starvation. The family lived on fish caught from the river, using hooks and lines fashioned from whatever materials they could find. Wild onions and garlic gathered from the steppe provided essential vitamins, but little in the way of calories. They learned to identify and harvest dozens of different plants that most Mongols would have considered beneath their dignity to eat. Temujin and his brothers became expert at trapping small animals, marmots, field mice, and birds that could supplement their meager diet. They ate the roots of steppe plants, berries when they could find them, and learned to extract nutrition from sources that other people would never have considered. Their clothing became a patchwork of repairs and replacements, as they learned to make the most of every scrap of material available. Hulin taught her children to repair felt with scraps, to patch leather with whatever could be found or improvised. Their gear was so worn that it barely kept out the wind and rain, and during the worst storms, the family huddled together for warmth and protection. They learned to make tools from bone and stone, to fashion weapons from whatever materials were available, and to survive on resources that would have seemed impossible to most people of their time. During this period, Temujin's character began to form in ways that would later define his leadership style. He learned that survival often depended on hard choices, that loyalty must be earned rather than assumed, and that strength was the only currency that mattered in the harsh world of the steppe. He also learned to read people, to understand their motivations, and predict their actions, skills that would prove invaluable when he began building his empire. The experience of abandonment by his father's followers, taught him that traditional loyalties were unreliable and that new forms of organization and motivation would be necessary to build anything lasting in the fractured world of Mongol politics. The relationship between Temujin and his half-brothers became strained during this period of hardship. Competition for limited resources led to conflicts that reflected the broader struggles of steppe life. The most serious of these conflicts involved Bekta, Temujin's older half-brother, who began to assert authority over the family's meager resources. According to the secret history, tensions came to a head when Bekta took fish and game that Temujin and his full brother Kasar had caught, claiming them by right of seniority and birth order. This dispute over food represented a much larger conflict about leadership and authority within the struggling family. The resolution of this conflict revealed the ruthless pragmatism that would later characterize Temujin's approach to power. Rather than accept Bekta's dominance, Temujin and Kasar ambushed and killed their half-brother, eliminating a rival for leadership and resources within their own family. This act of fratricide, while shocking by modern standards, reflected the brutal realities of survival on the steppe, where weakness or division could mean death for everyone. Holin was reportedly furious with her sons for this act, recognizing that it weakened the family's already precarious position, but she also understood the logic behind their decision. This event marked a turning point in Temujin's development as a leader. He had demonstrated his willingness to make the hardest possible choices to ensure survival and maintain authority. He had also shown that he would not accept subordination to anyone, even within his own family, if he believed his leadership was more effective. His characteristics, forged in the crucible of family conflict and desperate poverty, would later enable him to unite the fractious tribes of Mongolia under his sole authority. The killing of Bekta also demonstrated Temujin's understanding that traditional forms of authority based on age or birth order were less important than practical effectiveness and the will to exercise power. The first major test of Temujin's emerging leadership came when he was still a teenager. He had been captured by the Taichuid, a rival clan that had old grievances against his family. The Taichuid were closely related to Temujin's clan, but political disputes and questions of succession had turned them into bitter enemies. They fitted him with a wooden collar called a kang, a heavy yoke that prevented him from using his hands effectively, and planned to keep him as a prisoner and eventual slave. This device, borrowed from Chinese judicial practices, was designed to humiliate the prisoner while making escape nearly impossible. But Temujin's resourcefulness and determination showed themselves even in this desperate situation. He carefully observed his captors, noting their routines and weaknesses, waiting for the right opportunity to attempt an escape. During a festival, when his captors were drunk and distracted by celebrations, he managed to slip away from the camp under cover of darkness. The escape itself was a testament to his intelligence and planning. He had waited for the night of the new moon, when darkness would provide maximum concealment, and had carefully studied the layout of the camp and the patterns of the guards. Once free of the immediate camp, Temujin faced the challenge of surviving in the wilderness. While wearing the heavy kang that marked him as an escaped prisoner, he hid in a nearby river, submerged to his neck, with only his face above water, breathing through the hollow stems of reeds that grew along the banks. For days he remained hidden, while search parties scoured the area, following a survival technique that demonstrated his intimate knowledge of the natural world. The river provided both concealment and protection from the wooden collar, which would have made travel on land nearly impossible. Finally, he made his way to the home of a sympathetic family, members of his own clan, who had chosen to remain neutral in the political disputes that had led to his capture. These people, at great risk to their own safety, helped him remove the kang and provided him with a horse for his journey back to his family. This act of loyalty from people who had little reason to help him demonstrated the respect that Temujin was beginning to earn, even among those who were not formally his followers. The family that helped him understood that they were taking a significant risk, but they also recognized that Temujin represented a potential future leader who might remember their assistance. This escape became legendary among the Mongols, not just for its audacity, but for what it revealed about Temujin's character. He had shown that he could endure hardship, think clearly under pressure, and turn apparent defeat into victory through intelligence and determination. Word of his escape spread across the steppes, and for the first time people began to take notice of Yashuge's son. The story was told and retold around campfires, gaining details and significance with each telling until it became part of the growing legend that surrounded the young man who refused to accept defeat. Temujin's rise to power was neither quick nor easy. He understood that in the fractured world of Mongol politics he needed allies, and he began the careful process of building relationships that would support his growing ambitions. His first major alliance was with Jamika, his childhood friend and blood brother. The two young men had sworn the Oath of Anda, a bond that was considered sacred among the Mongols, making them closer than brothers by blood. This relationship had its roots in their shared youth, when both had faced the challenges of growing up in the violent and uncertain world of the steppes. Jamukha was everything that Temujin was not in terms of traditional steppe society. He was a member of the established nobility, descended from chiefs and khans who had ruled Mongol tribes for generations. His family had never experienced the poverty and abandonment that had shaped Temujin's character. Jamukha believed in the traditional social order where birth determined position and where established families had the right to rule over lesser clans. He was charismatic, intelligent, and skilled in both warfare and politics, making him a natural leader by the standards of his time. For a time, this alliance served both men well. They combined their followers and resources, creating a force strong enough to challenge larger tribes and accomplish successful raids that brought them wealth and prestige. Their combined leadership attracted warriors from smaller clans who saw opportunity in following two young leaders who seemed destined for greatness. The partnership allowed both men to learn from each other, with Jamukha providing knowledge of traditional steppe politics, while Temujin contributed innovative approaches to military organization and strategy. But the seeds of future conflict were already present in their fundamental disagreement about the nature of leadership and society. So Jamukha represented the traditional way of doing things. He believed in the old social order, where nobles ruled because of their ancestry, where loyalty was based on tribal affiliation, and where change came slowly through established channels. So Jamukha, shaped by his years of hardship and abandonment, believed in a different vision, where merit mattered more than bloodline, where loyalty was earned rather than inherited, and where effective leadership was more important than traditional legitimacy. The break between the two friends came gradually, then suddenly. Minor disagreements over strategy and the division of spoils from raids grew into more serious conflicts. About the direction of their alliance, Jamukha, despite his noble birth, was jealous of Temujin's growing reputation and the loyalty he inspired in their followers. Temujin, for his part, began to see Jamukha as representative of the old ways that had allowed his family to be abandoned when they needed help most. The tension between them became increasingly obvious to their followers, who began to choose sides in what was becoming an inevitable confrontation. These philosophical differences became apparent in their approach to governing their combined forces. Jamukha favored traditional methods of maintaining discipline and loyalty, relying on clan bonds and ancient customs to hold their confederation together. Temujin began experimenting with new forms of organization, promoting capable warriors regardless of their tribal background, and creating loyalty through shared success rather than inherited obligation. The warriors themselves began to notice these differences, and many found Temujin's approach more appealing than Jamukha's reliance on traditional authority. The final rupture came during a hunt, when followers of both men argued over the distribution of game. What began as a minor dispute escalated into accusations of theft and insult. The argument revealed the deeper tensions that had been building between the two factions and the fundamental incompatibility of their leaders' visions for the future of Mongol society. Jamukha, in a moment of anger, made a statement that revealed his true feelings about his blood brother's lowly origins, reminding everyone present that Temujin was the son of a minor chieftain who had died in disgrace and abandonment. Temujin, who had learned to control his emotions during his years of hardship, said nothing in response. But that night, he quietly began moving his followers away from Jamukha's camp. This separation was conducted with careful planning and subtlety, as Temujin understood that an open break would lead to immediate warfare before he was ready for such a confrontation. When morning came, Jamuka found himself abandoned by nearly half of his warriors. They had chosen to follow Temujin, drawn by his reputation for fairness, his skill as a leader, and his vision of a different kind of society where merit mattered more than birth. This was the moment when Temujin's transformation from survivor to conqueror truly began. The warriors who followed him represented not just military strength, but validation of his approach to leadership and organization. They came from different tribes and clans, united not by traditional loyalties, but by their belief in Temujin's vision of the future. This diverse following would become the foundation of the military machine that would eventually conquer much of the known world. Their decision to abandon Jamaica and follow an upstart with no traditional claim to authority represented a revolution in steppe politics that would have consequences far beyond Mongolia. The civil war that followed between Temujin and Jamaica would last for years and involve most of the tribes of Mongolia in a struggle that went beyond personal ambition. It represented a conflict between two different visions of Mongol society. The Jamaica fought to preserve the traditional order, where noble birth determined one's place in society, and where ancient customs and tribal loyalties maintained the social structure. The Temujin offered something revolutionary, a meritocracy where ability and loyalty mattered more than ancestry, where warriors could rise based on their achievements rather than their family connections. Temujin's military genius began to show itself during this period. He understood that traditional steppe warfare, with its emphasis on individual prowess and clan loyalty, was ultimately self-defeating. Instead, he began to develop new tactics that emphasized discipline, coordination, and the systematic application of force. He organized his followers into the decimal system. We discussed earlier creating a military structure that could respond quickly to his commands and adapt to changing circumstances with unprecedented efficiency. This policy had profound consequences for the development of Temujin's military and political power. It meant that his forces grew stronger with each victory, as defeated enemies became new allies, rather than sources of ongoing resistance and resentment. It also meant that his army became increasingly diverse, incorporating not just Mongols, but Tatars, Karatis, Merkits, and members of other tribes, each bringing their own skills and knowledge to the growing confederation. This diversity became a source of strength, as each group contributed its own military techniques, cultural practices, and local knowledge to the collective enterprise of conquest. More importantly, Temujin revolutionized the way defeated enemies were treated. Traditional steppe warfare was often genocidal. Defeated tribes were either eliminated entirely or absorbed through marriage and adoption processes that could take generations to complete effectively. Temujin offered a third option: surrender and integration. Warriors who submitted to him were incorporated into his army, often at the same rank they had held before. Leaders who proved their loyalty were promoted based on their abilities rather than their origins, creating opportunities that had never existed in traditional Mongol society. The process of unification was neither smooth nor bloodless. Some tribes resisted fiercely, requiring military campaigns that lasted months or years and involved complex strategies of siege warfare, cavalry attacks, and psychological intimidation. Others attempted to play different factions against each other, hoping to preserve their independence through clever diplomacy and strategic alliances. Still others submitted quickly, recognizing that Temujin's vision offered them opportunities they had never had under the old system of tribal hierarchy and inherited authority. One of the most significant and brutal campaigns was against the Tatars, the tribe that had killed Temujin's father through poison and had long been enemies of the Mongol confederations. This campaign was particularly vicious, driven by both strategic necessity and personal vengeance for the death of Yusuge many years earlier. Temujin ordered that all Tatar men taller than the height of a cart axle be killed, ensuring that no future generation of Tatars could threaten his people or seek revenge for their defeat. The surviving women and children were distributed among Mongol families gradually absorbed into the growing empire through marriage and adoption. This campaign against the Tatars established a pattern that would characterize Temujin's later conquests, as he could be remarkably generous to those who submitted willingly, offering them positions and opportunities in his growing empire that exceeded what they had enjoyed under their previous rulers. But he was absolutely ruthless to those who resisted or betrayed him, using terror and destruction as weapons to discourage future opposition. The psychological impact of this reputation often made his subsequent campaigns easier, as potential enemies understood the consequences of resistance and the benefits of submission. The final confrontation with Genghis came after years of maneuvering and smaller conflicts that had gradually weakened the traditional confederation and strengthened Temujin's position. By this time, Temujin had assembled a coalition that included most of the major tribes of Mongolia, united not by traditional tribal loyalties, but by their recognition of his effective leadership and the opportunities his system offered to capable and loyal followers. Genghis, despite his noble birth and traditional legitimacy, found himself increasingly isolated as even his own supporters began to desert him. The battle itself was less decisive than the political maneuvering that preceded it. Genghis' forces, weakened by defections and demoralized by their isolation, were defeated relatively easily in engagement that demonstrated the superior organization and discipline of Temujin's military system. But the aftermath of the battle revealed much about Temujin's character and his vision for the future of Mongol society. When Genghis was finally captured and brought before his former blood brother, Temujin offered him a chance to resume their friendship and serve as his lieutenant in the unified Mongolia he was creating. Genghis' refusal of this offer reflected his understanding that their visions of society were fundamentally incompatible. He could not serve under a system that rejected the traditional privileges of noble birth and ancient tribal hierarchies that had defined Mongol society for generations. That, in a final gesture of respect for their former bond and recognition of Genghis' noble status, he asked Temujin to grant him a death worthy of his rank. Temujin agreed, ordering that Genghis be executed without spilling his blood, in accordance with Mongol beliefs about the sanctity of life force and the proper treatment of noble prisoners. This execution, while it eliminated Temujin's last major rival, also demonstrated his commitment to maintaining certain aspects of traditional Mongol culture, even as he revolutionized the political and social organization of the tribes. That showed that his innovations were not simply destructive of the old ways, but represented a synthesis of new methods with enduring values that would make his empire both effective and legitimate in the eyes of his subjects. With Genghis' death, the unification of Mongolia was essentially complete. In 1206, the various tribes gathered in a great Kurultai, a traditional assembly where important decisions were made by consensus of the assembled leaders. That this Kurultai was different from any that had come before. Instead of electing a Khan from among the traditional nobility, the assembled tribes chose Temujin, the former outcast, to rule over them all. This decision represented not just the victory of one man over his rivals, but the triumph of a new form of political organization over the ancient system of tribal confederation. The ceremony that followed was both ancient and revolutionary. Temujin was raised on a felt carpet, lifted high by the assembled Khans, in the traditional manner that had been used to elect steppe leaders for centuries, but the title they gave him was new and unprecedented. Genghis Khan, which most scholars believe means universal ruler, or ruler of all between the oceans, was a title that reflected not just his authority over the Mongol tribes, but his ambition to extend that authority far beyond the boundaries of the steppe. It was a declaration of intent to create an empire that would encompass the entire known world. The transformation from Temujin, the outcast, to Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, was now complete. The boy who had once survived on-field mice and wild onions now commanded an army of over 100,000 warriors, the largest unified force the steppes had ever seen. He had created not just a military machine, but a new kind of society based on merit rather than birth, loyalty rather than tribal affiliation, and shared purpose rather than ancient grudges. and traditional divisions. But even as the celebrations of his election continued, Genghis Khan was already looking beyond the borders of Mongolia. The unification of the tribes was not an end in itself, but merely the first step in a much grander vision. The military machine he had created needed victories to maintain its cohesion, and the steppes themselves could not support the large population he now commanded. The only solution was expansion, conquest, and the creation of an empire that would span continents and transform the political landscape of the medieval world. The boy who had once been abandoned by his father's followers had become the man who would reshape the world. His rise from outcast to conqueror was complete, but his greatest achievements still lay ahead. Of the disciplined army of warriors we experienced earlier, the harsh life of the steppe that had shaped his character, and the political genius that had unified the tribes, all of these would now be turned toward the conquest of the civilized world. But the transformation was remarkable, but the revolution he had created would prove to be even more extraordinary in its ultimate consequences for the history of humanity. Chapter 3: The Secret History of the Mongols. Decoding the Empire's Hidden Chronicle. As we move deeper into our nocturnal journey through the Mongol world, let your mind wander to the realm of mysteries and hidden knowledge. We shift now from the story of conquest to the puzzle of understanding. How do we truly know what we know about these remarkable people? The Mongols left behind more than just the ruins of conquered cities and the genetic traces of their passage. They left us riddles wrapped in silk and buried in the earth, waiting for modern scholars and archaeologists to unlock their secrets. In the quiet hours of night when the modern world sleeps, these mysteries whisper to us across the centuries, revealing truths that challenge everything we thought we understood about medieval civilization. Imagine yourself in a monastery library in the 14th century. Candlelight flickers across ancient manuscripts, and among the carefully preserved texts is one document that stands apart from all others, written in a script that few can read, telling stories that were forbidden to outsiders. For centuries, this is the secret history of the Mongols, the most important historical document of the Mongol Empire, and also its most enigmatic. The very existence of this text represents a miracle of preservation, having survived wars, conquests, political upheavals, and the simple passage of time that has claimed so many other records of medieval civilization. The secret history is unlike any other historical chronicle of its time. Most medieval historical works were written by outsiders, Chinese scholars recording barbarian invasions, Persian historians documenting their conquerors, European monks describing the terror from the east. These accounts, while valuable, inevitably reflect the perspectives and prejudices of settled peoples, observing nomadic conquerors whom they often misunderstood or deliberately misrepresented. But the secret history was written by the Mongols themselves, for the Mongols themselves, in their own language and from their own perspective. It is the only major historical work that tells the story of the Mongol Empire from the inside, providing insights into Mongol culture, beliefs, and motivations that would be completely invisible to outside observers. Yet, for centuries, this invaluable document was lost to the outside world. The text was written in a script derived from the Ujur alphabet, adapted for the Mongol language by Genghis Khan's adopted son Tatatunga, a Naiman prince who had been captured and subsequently integrated into the Mongol administration. This script, while functional for administrative purposes, was never widely adopted beyond the imperial court, and its knowledge remained confined to a small group of educated scribes and officials. When the Mongol Empire eventually fragmented and the various successor states adopted different writing systems, knowledge of the original script gradually faded into obscurity. The secret history became truly secret, hidden not by design, but by the simple passage of time and the evolution of language and political structures. The mystery deepens when we consider the document's origins and its remarkable preservation. Scholars believe it was compiled around 2040, just a few years after Genghis Khan's death, making it a near contemporary account of his life and the early empire. But who wrote it? The text itself provides few clues, maintaining an anonymity that has frustrated historians for generations. But the anonymous author or authors clearly had access to intimate details of Genghis Khan's life, conversations that took place in private, family disputes that would not have been widely known, even the great Khan's own reflections on his past and his motivations. This level of access suggests someone very close to the imperial family, perhaps a member of the inner circle of advisors and confidants who surrounded the Khan throughout his rise to power. Some scholars suggest it was written by Shigi Kutuk, Genghis Khan's adopted son who served as the empire's chief judge and was known for his learning and administrative skills. Others point to evidence that suggests multiple authors, perhaps working from oral traditions that had been carefully preserved by the Khan's family and closest associates. The author or authors demonstrate an intimate knowledge of Mongol customs, genealogies, and the complex web of relationships that bound the steppe tribes together. They understand the significance of shamanic rituals, the importance of dreams and omens in Mongol decision-making, and the intricate marriage customs that served as the foundation of political alliances among nomadic peoples. What makes The Secret History particularly fascinating is its tone and content. This is not a work of propaganda designed to glorify the Khan and his achievements. Instead, it presents a remarkably honest portrait of Genghis Khan as a human being, showing his moments of doubt, his political calculations, even his failures and mistakes. The text describes his childhood poverty in unflinching detail, includes embarrassing stories about his youth, and presents him as a complex figure rather than a demigod. But this honesty is almost unique in medieval historical writing, where rulers were typically portrayed as paragons of virtue and divine representatives on earth. The document reveals aspects of Mongol culture that would have been completely invisible to outside observers. It describes shamanic rituals in extraordinary detail, explaining the significance of dreams and omens in Mongol decision-making and providing insights into the complex marriage customs that bound the steppe tribes together. It also contains the only detailed account we have of Genghis Khan's own words and thoughts, preserved in a tradition of oral history that valued accuracy over flattery. These quotations, whether authentic or stylized representations of the Khan's philosophy, provide unique insights into the mind of one of history's most successful conquerors and empire builders. For modern archaeologists and historians, The Secret History has become a treasure map, pointing them toward discoveries that continue to reshape our understanding of the Mongol Empire. References in the text to specific locations, battles, and customs have guided excavations that have revealed the sophisticated nature of Mongol civilization. Far from being simple nomads who lived in tents and knew nothing of urban life, the Mongols created complex administrative centers, trade networks, and cultural institutions that rivaled anything produced by their settled contemporaries. One of the most significant archaeological discoveries guided by The Secret History was the location of Karakorum, the Mongol capital established by Genghis Khan's successor, Ögedei Khan. For centuries, the exact location of this legendary city was unknown. Medieval European visitors, like William of Rubruck and John of Plano Capini, had left descriptions of the city, but these were vague and often contradictory. Chinese sources mentioned it, but provided little useful geographical information that could help modern scholars locate the ruins. The city seemed to have vanished as completely as if it had never existed, leaving only legends and fragmentary accounts of its former magnificence. The Secret History, however, contains specific details about the landscape surrounding Karakorum, the rivers, mountains, and seasonal camping grounds used by the Khan's court. These geographical references, when combined with careful analysis of medieval trade routes and political geography, allowed modern archaeologists to identify the likely location in central Mongolia. Excavations beginning in the 1940s and continuing to the present day have revealed the remains of a remarkably sophisticated urban center that challenges many assumptions about nomadic civilization and medieval urban development. Karakorum was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The city contained not just Mongol structures, but Buddhist temples, Christian churches, and Islamic mosques, reflecting the religious diversity of the empire. Excavations have uncovered evidence of advanced metallurgy, including workshops that produced both weapons and luxury goods, using techniques that combined traditions from across the known world. A city had a sophisticated water management system, with canals and reservoirs, that supported a large population in an otherwise arid region. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city's population may have reached 50,000 or more at its peak, making it one of the largest urban centers in medieval Asia. Perhaps most surprising of all, archaeologists have found evidence that Karakorum was a center of international trade and diplomacy on a scale that rivaled the greatest cities of medieval Europe and Asia. And artifacts recovered from the site include Chinese porcelain, Persian glass, European textiles, and Indian spices. The city served as a hub where goods and ideas from across the known world converged, challenging the traditional image of the Mongols as simple nomads who contributed nothing to world civilization. The archaeological record reveals a cosmopolitan center where craftsmen from different cultures worked together to create new forms of art and technology that synthesized the best traditions of East and West. Recent DNA studies have provided another window into the Mongol world, revealing the true scope of their influence on global populations. The genetic legacy of the Mongol expansion is written in the DNA of millions of people across Asia and Europe. Advanced genetic analysis has identified specific markers that can be traced to the Mongol heartland, and the distribution of these markers maps closely to the historical extent of the Mongol Empire. These studies represent a new form of archaeology, one that reads the evidence written in human genes rather than buried in the earth. One of the most startling discoveries from these genetic studies concerns Genghis Khan himself. Researchers suggested that approximately 8% of men in the former Mongol Empire carry a Y chromosome lineage that appears to originate from a single male ancestor living around 1,000 years ago. While this cannot be definitively linked to Genghis Khan himself, the timing and geographical distribution strongly suggest a connection to the royal family of the early Mongol Empire. This genetic evidence represents the biological signature of conquest on an unprecedented scale, demonstrating that the Mongol expansion had demographic consequences that lasted for centuries. This genetic evidence reveals something remarkable about Mongol society and the scope of their influence. The traditional pattern of nomadic conquest typically involved relatively small numbers of warriors who would conquer settled populations and then be absorbed into those populations over time. The Mongol pattern was different. Their conquests led to sustained population exchanges that lasted for generations, fundamentally altering the genetic landscape of Eurasia. This biological legacy parallels and reinforces the cultural and political impact of Mongol rule, demonstrating that their influence extended far beyond the duration of their political control. Archaeological evidence from across the former Mongol Empire has revealed another aspect of their influence that was largely invisible to traditional historical sources: their role as facilitators of technological and cultural exchange. The Mongols didn't just conquer territories, they actively promoted the exchange of knowledge, techniques, and innovations across their vast domain. This policy of cultural synthesis and technological transfer created a medieval form of globalization that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. Excavations at sites across Asia have revealed evidence of this cultural synthesis. Chinese printing techniques appear in Persian manuscripts. Islamic astronomical instruments are found in Chinese observatories. European metalworking techniques show up in Central Asian workshops. The Mongols served as a conduit for the exchange of knowledge on a scale that transformed the technological capabilities of multiple civilizations. This transfer of technology and knowledge was not accidental, but represented a deliberate policy of the Mongol administration, which recognized that the prosperity of their empire depended on maximizing the productive capacity of their subjects. One particularly intriguing archaeological mystery concerns the Mongol practice of religious tolerance. The secret history describes Genghis Khan's policy of respecting all religions and incorporating religious leaders from different traditions into his administration. Archaeological evidence supports this, but it also reveals something more complex. The Mongols didn't just tolerate different religions, they actively synthesized elements from different traditions to create new forms of religious expression. At sites across the former empire, Archaeologists have found evidence of religious syncretism that blends Mongol shamanic traditions with Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, and other belief systems. These hybrid religious practices appear to have been officially sanctioned and may have served as a way of unifying diverse populations under Mongol rule. The archaeological evidence suggests that the Mongols developed a sophisticated understanding of how religious beliefs could be used to create loyalty and stability in their diverse empire. This approach to religion was both pragmatic and innovative, representing an early form of multiculturalism that was centuries ahead of its time in most parts of the world. Recent discoveries have also challenged traditional assumptions about Mongol military technology. While they are famous for their mastery of horse archery, archaeological evidence suggests that the Mongols were also sophisticated engineers who developed advanced siege technologies and military logistics systems. Excavations at sites of Mongol sieges have revealed evidence of advanced catapults, early firearms, and complex engineering works that allowed them to capture fortified cities that had been considered impregnable by their enemies. The Mongols appear to have been remarkably quick to adopt and improve upon military technologies they encountered during their conquests. Chinese siege engines were modified and improved. Persian fire weapons were adapted for use by cavalry forces. European crossbow technology was integrated into Mongol military doctrine. This technological adaptability was one of the keys to their military success, allowing them to overcome the defensive advantages of settled civilizations while maintaining the mobility that was their greatest strength. Perhaps most intriguingly, some archaeological evidence suggests that the Mongols may have been involved in technological innovations that were previously attributed to other cultures. The recent discoveries have suggested possible Mongol involvement in the development of early printing techniques, improvements in navigation technology, and advances in metallurgy that spread along the trade routes they control. Along these findings challenge the traditional view of the Mongols as primarily destructive conquerors and suggest that they played a more creative role in medieval technological development than previously understood. The environmental impact of the Mongol Empire is another area where archaeological evidence is providing new insights. Traditional historical sources focus on the human cost of Mongol conquests, but they provide little information about the environmental consequences of their rule. Modern archaeological techniques, including analysis of pollen cores, tree rings, and soil composition, are revealing that the Mongol period was associated with significant environmental changes across Eurasia. In some regions, the Mongol conquest led to reforestation, as agricultural lands were abandoned and reverted to their natural state. The demographic disruption caused by warfare and disease reduced human pressure on forest ecosystems, allowing them to recover from centuries of clearing and cultivation. In other areas, increased trade and urbanization led to deforestation and soil degradation, as growing cities demanded more resources than the surrounding environment could sustainably provide. The overall pattern suggests that the Mongol Empire had environmental impacts on a scale that paralleled its political and cultural influence. These environmental changes had lasting consequences that extended far beyond the duration of Mongol rule. Climate data suggests that some of the environmental modifications caused by Mongol policies contributed to regional climate changes that affected agricultural productivity and population patterns. For centuries, the Mongol Empire may have been one of the first human institutions to have truly global environmental impacts, prefiguring the kind of planet-wide changes that would later characterize the modern industrial era. One of the most persistent mysteries surrounding the Mongol Empire concerns the location of Genghis Khan's tomb. The secret history provides few clues about his burial, stating only that he was interred, according to Mongol custom, without the elaborate tomb monuments favored by other rulers of his era. For nearly 800 years, the location of his final resting place has remained unknown, despite numerous attempts to find it by everyone from treasure hunters to serious archaeologists. The search for Genghis Khan's tomb has taken on almost mythical proportions, combining archaeology with treasure hunting and international intrigue. Various expeditions have claimed to have found evidence of the tomb, but none have produced conclusive proof. The difficulty is compounded by Mongol burial customs, which emphasized secrecy and the return of burial sites to their natural state. According to tradition, the burial party would have killed anyone who witnessed the interment, then returned the site to its original appearance, making it virtually impossible to locate. Centuries later, recent technological advances, including satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, have opened new possibilities for the search. Several current projects are using these tools to systematically survey areas of Mongolia where the tomb might be located. Advanced computer analysis of satellite images can detect subtle variations in vegetation and soil that might indicate buried structures. Ground-penetrating radar can identify underground anomalies that might represent burial chambers or associated structures. But even if the tomb is eventually found, Mongol cultural traditions and modern Mongolian law may prevent its excavation, preserving the mystery for future generations. The ongoing archaeological investigation of the Mongol Empire is revealing a civilization far more complex and sophisticated than traditional historical sources suggested. Rather than simple, nomadic warriors, the Mongols appear to have been skilled administrators, innovative engineers, and sophisticated cultural synthesizers who created one of history's most successful and influential empires. Their achievements in military organization, administrative efficiency, and cultural integration were centuries ahead of their time and provided models that would influence the development of later empires and nation-states. These discoveries are forcing historians to reconsider fundamental assumptions about the relationship between nomadic and settled civilizations, the nature of medieval globalization, and the factors that enabled some empires to achieve unprecedented scale and longevity. The archaeological record suggests that the Mongol achievement was not just military but represented a new form of political and cultural organization that anticipated many features of the modern world. Their approach to governance, religious tolerance, cultural integration, and technological innovation created a template for empire building that would influence political development for centuries to come. The DNA evidence in particular suggests that the Mongol influence on world history was even more profound than previously understood. Say, the genetic legacy of their expansion can be traced in populations across 3 continents, representing one of the most significant demographic events in human history. This biological impact paralleled and reinforced their cultural and political influence, creating changes that persisted long after the empire itself had fragmented into successor states with different political and cultural orientations. As modern techniques continue to unlock the secrets buried in the archaeological record, our understanding of the Mongol Empire continues to evolve. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, revealing the true scope of their achievements and their lasting impact on world civilization. The empire that began with a group of nomadic tribes on the Asian steppes ultimately created a legacy that shaped the genetic, cultural, and political landscape of much of the world. The mysteries that remain, from the location of Genghis Khan's tomb to the full extent of Mongol technological innovations, ensure that the study of this remarkable empire will continue to yield surprises and insights for generations to come. In the quiet hours of archaeological excavation and laboratory analysis, scholars continue to decode the secrets of a civilization that, despite its fame, remains in many ways as mysterious as it was 8 centuries ago. The secret history may have preserved the authentic voice of the Mongols themselves, but the full story of their achievements and influence continues to emerge from the earth, one discovery at a time, revealing new chapters in one of history's most extraordinary and transformative episodes. Chapter 4: 10th Thrones, Luxury and Power Among the Great Khans. As our journey through the Mongol world draws toward its gentle conclusion, let your mind drift from the mysteries of the past to a very different aspect of this remarkable empire. We began with the harsh realities of warrior life, the cold, the hunger, the constant danger that marked every moment of existence on the unforgiving steppe. We followed the rise of a remarkable leader from those same harsh conditions, witnessing the transformation of an abandoned child into the master of nations. We explored the hidden knowledge that archaeologists continue to uncover, revealing the sophisticated nature of Mongol civilization. Now, as the night deepens and your breathing naturally slows, we enter a world that seems almost impossibly removed from where we started, the opulent realm of the great Khans, where luxury beyond imagination existed alongside the continuation of ancient traditions. Picture, if you will, a scene that would have seemed like a vision from a dream to the common warriors we met at the beginning of our journey. The sun is setting over the Mongolian steppe, painting the endless grassland in shades of gold and amber. But here, rising from the plain like a mirage made manifest, is a city unlike any other in the medieval world, a city of silk and felt, of gold and precious stones, a city that moves with the seasons, and yet rivals the greatest capitals of the settled world in its magnificence and complexity. This is the Ordi, the great travelling court of the Mongol Khan, a movable city that could house tens of thousands of people and yet be packed up and relocated in a matter of days. The very concept challenges our modern understanding of urban life and political power. How can a city move? How can the seat of the world's largest empire exist without permanent foundations, walls, or fixed structures? Yet this mobile capital represented the perfect synthesis of nomadic traditions with imperial power, combining the flexibility that had always been the source of steppe strength with the resources and luxury that conquest had brought to the Mongol rulers. At the center of this remarkable, mobile metropolis stands the greatest ger ever constructed. Not the simple felt tent of the common herder, but a structure so large that it requires a team of 20 oxen to move it, decorated with precious metals and filled with treasures gathered from across the known world. This imperial ger, known as the Golden Ordi, represents the ultimate evolution of traditional nomadic architecture. Its lattice framework is constructed from the finest woods, often rosewood or sandalwood, imported from the distant forests of Southeast Asia. The felt covering is not the rough, utilitarian material used by common Mongols, but specially prepared felt, dyed in brilliant colors, using pigments that cost more than most people would see in a lifetime. The contrast between this world and the life of the common warrior is so stark as to seem almost impossible to reconcile. While ordinary soldiers slept on hard ground, wrapped in their meager possessions, the Khan rested on silk cushions, stuffed with the down of Arctic birds, surrounded by carpets woven from the finest wool, and dyed with colors that required rare materials gathered from the ends of the earth. The fermented mare's milk that sustained the army was still served at the Khan's table, but alongside it were wines from the vineyards of Persia, spirits distilled in China, and delicacies gathered from every corner of the vast empire. The Khan's ger itself was a marvel of medieval engineering and artistry. The interior space was divided into sections, each serving specific functions in the complex ritual of imperial government. The throne room occupied the central and most sacred space, oriented according to ancient shamanic principles that connected the earthly ruler to the eternal blue sky that was the supreme deity of traditional Mongol religion. The walls were lined with silks from China, their surfaces decorated with images of dragons, phoenixes, and other mythical creatures that symbolized imperial power. Tapestries from Persia told stories of ancient kings and legendary heroes, while furs from the northern forests, ermine, sable, and fox pelts, provided both warmth and a display of wealth that spoke to visitors from across the known world. At the center of this magnificent dwelling stood the Khan's throne, and it was here that the true power of the empire was most clearly displayed. The throne itself was a work of art, carved from precious woods and inlaid with gold, silver, and precious stones that had been gathered from conquered territories across 3 continents. But it was what surrounded the throne that truly demonstrated the reach of Mongol power, gifts, and tribute. From every corner of the known world, arranged in careful displays that told the story of conquest and submission, in a visual language that could be understood by visitors regardless of their cultural background. Here were bolts of silk from the workshops of China, their colors so vibrant they seemed to glow in the lamplight. The silk itself represented thousands of hours of careful cultivation, of silkworms, the harvesting of cocoons, and the intricate process of weaving that created fabrics of unprecedented beauty and value. These textiles were not just luxury goods, but symbols of Chinese submission to Mongol rule, representing the productive capacity of the world's most advanced civilization, placed at the service of the nomadic conquerors. There were carpets from Persia, their intricate patterns, telling stories of ancient kings and mythical beasts. These carpets represented the culmination of centuries of Persian artistic tradition, each one requiring months or even years to complete. The patterns themselves were not merely decorative, but carried deep cultural and religious significance, representing the cosmic order and the relationship between earthly rulers and divine authority. Their presence in the Khan's Jur demonstrated not just the wealth of the empire, but its ability to command the finest artistic traditions of multiple civilizations. Furs from the northern forests lay piled in luxurious abundance, ermine, sable, and fox pelts that represented entire seasons of trapping in the far north. These furs were not just valuable commodities, but symbols of the empire's geographic reach, demonstrating that Mongol power extended from the tropical regions of Southeast Asia to the Arctic regions of Siberia. The trappers who gathered these furs often risked their lives in harsh conditions that would challenge even the hardy Mongol warriors we encountered earlier in our journey. Weapons of exquisite craftsmanship displayed the finest work of smiths from Damascus, Toledo, and the forges of Central Asia. These were not mere tools of war, but works of art that demonstrated the technical mastery of the empire's subject peoples. Damascus steel, renowned throughout the medieval world for its strength and beauty, was forged into blades that could cut through lesser metals while maintaining edges sharp enough to split silk scarves dropped onto their surfaces. Toledo steel, the product of Spanish workshops that had inherited techniques from both Christian and Islamic traditions, was shaped into weapons that combined European and Moorish design elements. Central Asian metalwork brought together influences from China, Persia, and the steppe itself, creating hybrid styles that were uniquely Mongol. The daily routine of the Khan's court was as carefully orchestrated as a military campaign, but its purpose was to display power and luxury rather than to prepare for battle. The day began before dawn, with the Khan's personal servants, men and women chosen for their skill and absolute loyalty, preparing the elaborate rituals that marked the start of each day. These servants, many of them former nobles from conquered territories, understood that their lives depended on their ability to anticipate the Khan's needs and to perform their duties with flawless precision. The Khan's clothing was itself a display of imperial power, robes made from the finest silks, lined with precious furs and decorated with gold thread and precious stones. Each garment required the work of dozens of skilled craftsmen, from the silk weavers who created the base fabric to the embroiderers who added the intricate decorations that marked the wearer's status. The gold thread used in these decorations was often literally gold, beaten into wire so fine that it could be woven into fabric, creating garments that glittered and caught the light with every movement. The morning audience was a ceremony that combined practical governance with theatrical display. Representatives from across the empire would present themselves before the Khan, offering tribute, seeking justice, or reporting on the administration of distant territories. The careful protocol of these audiences reinforced the hierarchical nature of the empire: who could approach the throne, how close they could come, what gifts they must bring, and how they must present themselves were all carefully regulated to emphasize the Khan's supreme authority and the submission of all other powers to his will. The tribute brought to these audiences represented the wealth of continents. From China came silk, porcelain, tea, and the finest lacquerware. Chinese porcelain was particularly prized for its translucent beauty and the technical mastery required for its creation. The secret of porcelain production was closely guarded by Chinese craftsmen, making these vessels even more valuable to foreign rulers. Tea, still relatively unknown in the western parts of the empire, represented a luxury that required elaborate preparation and sophisticated knowledge of brewing techniques. Lacquerware, with its deep, lustrous finish and intricate decorations, demonstrated the artistic sophistication of Chinese workshops. From Persia came carpets, metalwork and the products of workshops that had served kings for centuries. Persian metalwork, particularly silver and gold, vessels decorated with intricate designs, represented the pinnacle of medieval craftsmanship. These pieces often took months to complete, with skilled artisans using techniques that had been passed down through generations of master craftsmen. The designs themselves drew on ancient Persian mythology and literature, creating objects that were both functional and deeply meaningful within Persian cultural traditions. From the northern forests came furs and amber. Amber, in particular, was highly prized for its beauty and rarity. These pieces of fossilized tree resin, often containing perfectly preserved insects or plant material, were regarded as magical objects that connected the present world to ancient times. The journey of amber from the Baltic forests to the Mongol court involved thousands of miles of dangerous travel through territories controlled by various peoples and kingdoms, making each piece a testament to the empire's ability to maintain trade routes across vast distances. From India came spices, precious stones, and the exotic products of tropical lands. Indian spices, particularly black pepper, cinnamon, and cardamom, were worth their weight in silver or gold. These spices not only enhanced the flavor of food, but were believed to have medicinal properties and were essential for preserving meat during long journeys. The precious stones from India, including diamonds, rubies, and sapphires, were set into jewelry and weapons that demonstrated the Khan's wealth and status. The journey of these goods from Indian markets to the Mongol court involved crossing some of the most dangerous and difficult terrain in the world, including mountain passes that were often blocked by snow for months at a time. From the Islamic world came books, astronomical instruments, and the accumulated knowledge of centuries of scholarship. Islamic books, written on paper rather than the parchment used in Europe, represented advanced manufacturing techniques and contained knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy that was far ahead of European learning. Astronomical instruments, including astrolabes and armillary spheres, demonstrated the sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that Islamic scholars had developed. These instruments were not just scientific tools, but works of art, decorated with intricate engravings and inscriptions from the Quran. But the Khan's court was more than just a display of wealth. It was also a center of learning and cultural exchange on a scale that had never been seen before. The Mongol policy of religious tolerance meant that the court housed Buddhist monks, Christian priests, Islamic scholars, and traditional Mongol shamans, all working together to serve the empire's administrative needs. The result was a unique synthesis of knowledge and traditions that influenced everything from law and governance to art and architecture. The Khan's library was one of the wonders of the medieval world. Here, gathered in one place, were manuscripts in dozens of languages, Chinese histories that recorded thousands of years of dynastic rule and administrative innovation, Persian poetry that expressed the deepest emotions and spiritual insights of Islamic and pre-Islamic cultures, Arabic treatises on mathematics and astronomy that had preserved and extended the knowledge of ancient Greek scholars, Latin works on theology and philosophy that represented the best of European medieval learning, and Mongol oral traditions that had been reduced to writing for the first time, preserving the wisdom and cultural memory of the steppe peoples. Scholars from across the empire worked together to translate these works, creating a cross-cultural exchange of knowledge that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. Chinese scholars learned Arabic mathematics, while Islamic astronomers studied Chinese star charts as Christian theologians debated with Buddhist philosophers, while Mongol shamans shared their understanding of the natural world with scholars from all traditions. This intellectual ferment created new forms of knowledge that synthesized the best insights from multiple civilizations. The palace workshops were equally remarkable, bringing together the finest craftsmen from across the empire to create objects of unprecedented beauty and sophistication. Chinese artisans worked alongside Persian masters, creating hybrid styles that combined the best traditions of both cultures. The resulting works often incorporated Chinese techniques for working with silk and porcelain, while using Persian design motifs and color schemes. Metalworkers from Damascus collaborated with jewelers from India to create weapons and ornaments that were both functional and magnificent. These pieces often combined Damascus steel with Indian gems and Mongol design elements, creating objects that were unique in the medieval world. The result was a court art that was distinctly Mongol, while incorporating influences from across the known world. This synthetic approach to culture and technology reflected the Mongol understanding that their empire's strength lay not in imposing a single culture on their subjects, but in drawing on the best elements from each conquered civilization. The Khan's court became a laboratory for cultural innovation, where traditions that had developed in isolation for centuries were brought together and combined in new ways. The Khan's personal guard represented another aspect of the court's international character. These were not just Mongol warriors, but elite soldiers chosen from across the empire for their skill and loyalty. Chinese crossbowmen served alongside Persian cavalry, while European knights who had entered Mongol service brought their own military traditions to the Khan's protection. This diversity of military traditions strengthened the guard while also serving as a symbol of the empire's inclusive approach to governance. The training and organization of this international guard required sophisticated understanding of different military cultures. Chinese crossbowmen were experts in siege warfare and the use of mechanical weapons that could penetrate heavy armor. Persian cavalry brought traditions of horse, archery and rapid movement that were similar to, but distinct from, Mongol techniques. European knights contributed knowledge of heavy armor and shock combat that could be valuable in certain tactical situations. The challenge was to integrate these different approaches into a unified force that could protect the Khan while also demonstrating the empire's ability to command the best military traditions from across the world. The women of the Khan's court occupied a position that was unique in the medieval world. Unlike the secluded women of many contemporary civilizations, Mongol women participated actively in governance and held positions of real authority. The Khan's wives and daughters were often given their own territories to govern, and their opinions were sought on matters of policy and strategy. This tradition had its roots in ancient steppe customs, where women had always played important roles in tribal governance and economic management. The most powerful of these women could command armies, conduct diplomacy, and influence succession disputes. Their education and training prepared them for these responsibilities through exposure to the best teachers and advisors available in the empire. They learned multiple languages, studied the history and customs of different cultures, and developed the diplomatic and administrative skills necessary to govern diverse populations. Their networks of allies and supporters often extended across vast distances, creating informal systems of communication and influence that complemented the formal structures of imperial government. The regents who ruled when a Khan died before his successor was chosen were often women, and they proved remarkably capable administrators. Faragina Khatun, the widow of Ogedei Khan, ruled the empire for 5 years, managing its vast territories and complex bureaucracy with skill and intelligence that impressed even the empire's enemies. During her regency, she maintained the stability of the empire, while managing the delicate process of succession that would determine the future direction of Mongol rule. Her ability to balance the competing interests of different factions and maintain the loyalty of distant governors demonstrated the sophisticated political skills that Mongol women developed through their participation in imperial governance. Sorghutani Beki, the mother of both Mengke and Kublai Khan, was considered one of the most capable politicians of her generation, and her influence shaped the empire's development for decades. She was an historian, Christian who maintained her faith while respecting the religious diversity of the empire. Her political intelligence and diplomatic skills enabled her to build coalitions that supported her son's claims to the throne, while also maintaining stability during periods of potential conflict. Her example inspired other noble women to take active roles in politics and governance, creating a tradition of female political participation that was unusual for its time. The daily life of these noble women was characterized by luxury that would have seemed impossible to the common people of the empire. They wore robes made from the finest silks, decorated with pearls and precious stones that had been gathered from across the known world. Their personal servants numbered in the hundreds, and their every need was attended to by specialists in everything from hairdressing to the preparation of cosmetics made from exotic ingredients gathered from across the empire. Yet this luxury came with real responsibility. These women were expected to manage vast households, oversee complex economic activities, and participate in the governance of territories that might span thousands of miles. They needed to understand the languages and customs of diverse populations, to navigate the complex politics of the court, and to maintain the delicate balance of power that held the empire together. Their education, therefore, was as comprehensive as that of any male noble, including training in languages, law, military strategy, and diplomatic protocol. Many of them became patrons of learning and the arts, supporting scholars and artists who created works that celebrated both their personal achievements and the glory of the emir. The ceremonies and festivals of the court provided opportunities for displays of magnificence that impressed visitors from across the known world. The annual Kurultai, or Great Assembly, brought together nobles from every corner of the empire for meetings that combined governance with spectacular displays of wealth and power. These gatherings might last for weeks, with thousands of participants camping in elaborate tent cities that temporarily rivaled the greatest urban centers of the world. The logistics of organizing these assemblies were staggering. Thousands of animals had to be gathered and slaughtered to feed the participants. Hundreds of tons of supplies had to be transported across vast distances. Elaborate temporary structures had to be erected to house the various ceremonies and meetings. The coordination required demonstrated the administrative sophistication of the Mongol government and its ability to mobilize resources on an unprecedented scale. The feasts during these assemblies were legendary. Tables laden with delicacies from across the empire groaned under the weight of foods that most people had never even heard of. There were dishes prepared according to Chinese recipes that required rare spices and complex preparation techniques, Persian specialties that demanded ingredients gathered from multiple regions and cooking methods that had been refined over centuries, exotic foods from India and the far south that challenged the palates of northern peoples, while demonstrating the empire's ability to command resources from tropical regions. The Khan's kitchens employed cooks from every part of the empire, creating a fusion cuisine that was unique in the medieval world. The entertainment at these gatherings was equally spectacular. Musicians from across the empire performed, creating new musical forms that blended diverse traditions. Chinese court musicians, with their sophisticated understanding of melody and harmony, played alongside Persian masters of the oud and other stringed instruments. Traditional Mongol singers told the ancient stories of the steppe in styles that had been refined by centuries of oral tradition. The dancers, acrobats, and performers of every description competed for the Khan's attention and reward. The resulting performances often combined elements from multiple cultures, creating hybrid art forms that were uniquely Mongol while drawing on the best traditions of conquered peoples. The gift-giving at these ceremonies reinforced the hierarchical nature of the empire while also demonstrating its wealth and reach, and subordinate Khans would present tribute that represented the finest products of their territories, while the great Khan would distribute rewards that demonstrated his generosity and power. These exchanges were carefully choreographed to reinforce political relationships, while also providing occasions for magnificent display. The gifts themselves often became family heirlooms that were passed down through generations, carrying with them the memory of the empire's glory. The Khan's personal treasures were beyond the imagination of ordinary people. His collection of precious stones included gems from every known source, diamonds from India that had been cut and polished by master craftsmen, rubies from Burma, that glowed like drops of liquid fire, emeralds from Egypt that captured and reflected light with supernatural beauty, and sapphires from Ceylon that seemed to contain the very essence of the sky itself. Each stone represented not just monetary value, but the empire's ability to command the rarest and most beautiful products of the earth. His personal armor was a work of art, made from the finest steel and decorated with gold and precious stones. The steel itself was forged using techniques that combined the best methods from multiple traditions, creating protection that was both incredibly strong and surprisingly light. The decorations were not merely ornamental, but served practical purposes as well, with gold inlays that helped to distribute the impact of blows and precious stones that were believed to have protective, magical properties. The armor represented hundreds of hours of skilled labor by master craftsmen who understood both the technical requirements of battlefield protection and the symbolic importance of imperial regalia. His weapons were created by the greatest smiths of the empire, combining functionality with beauty in ways that made them as much works of art as instruments of war. His personal sword was forged from Damascus, steel and decorated with precious metals and stones that created patterns of extraordinary beauty along its length. The bow he carried was made from the finest materials available and was capable of incredible accuracy and power. These weapons were not just tools, but symbols of his authority and the source of his power over the greatest empire the world had ever seen. The horses of the Khan's stable represented another form of imperial luxury. While common warriors rode the hardy ponies of the steppe, the Khan's mounts were selected from the finest breeding programs across the empire. Chinese war horses, bred for size and strength, Arabian stallions renowned for their speed and endurance, Persian coursers famous for their intelligence and loyalty. The imperial stables housed hundreds of animals that represented the pinnacle of medieval horsemanship and the investment of enormous resources in maintaining bloodlines that had been developed over centuries. Yet for all this luxury and display, the Khan remained connected to the traditions and customs of his people. The great Jir at the center of the court was still fundamentally a nomadic dwelling, capable of being dismantled and moved when the seasons demanded. The Khan still drank fermented mare's milk, still participated in the traditional hunts that were the training ground for Mongol warriors, and still maintained the shamanic traditions that connected him to the spiritual world of the steppe. This connection to tradition served important political functions, demonstrating that the Khan, despite his vast power and unprecedented wealth, remained true to the customs of his ancestors. This continuity provided a form of legitimacy that went beyond military conquest or administrative efficiency. It showed that the transformation from nomadic chief to world emperor had not fundamentally changed the nature of Mongol leadership. The Khan was still the first among equals, still bound by the same spiritual and cultural obligations that had governed steppe rulers for centuries. This balance between innovation and tradition was one of the keys to Mongol success, allowing them to adapt to new circumstances while maintaining the cultural identity that gave their empire its distinctive character. The education of royal children combined the best of both worlds. Young princes and princesses learned the traditional skills of the steppe, horsemanship, archery, and the management of livestock, but they also received training in languages, mathematics, and the administrative skills needed to govern a vast empire. They were taught by scholars from across the known world, creating a generation of leaders who were truly cosmopolitan in their outlook and abilities. This education prepared them to rule over diverse populations, while maintaining the essential character of Mongol civilization. The palace itself moved with the seasons, following the ancient rhythms of nomadic life, but on a scale that transformed those traditions into something entirely new. The summer capital might be established in the cool highlands, where the Khan could escape the heat while still maintaining contact with his vast territories. The winter quarters would be in more protected locations, where the court could maintain its elaborate ceremonies despite the harsh weather. The seasonal movement required careful coordination and planning, but it also demonstrated the empire's ability to maintain flexibility even at the highest levels of government. As our journey through the Mongol world draws to its close, the contrast between where we began and where we have ended seems almost dreamlike. We started with the common warrior, shivering in his felt tent, eating dried meat and fermented milk, facing the constant threat of death from enemies, weather, or disease. We end with the great Khan, surrounded by luxury beyond imagination, ruling an empire that spanned continents, commanding resources that dwarfed those of any other ruler in history. Yet these two worlds were intimately connected. The luxury of the court was built on the military success of the armies, and that success depended on the discipline, endurance, and skill of the common warriors. The wealth that flowed to the Khan's treasury came from the territories conquered by men who lived on dried meat and mare's milk. The cultural synthesis that characterized the court was made possible by the military machine that brought diverse populations under Mongol rule. In the quiet hours of night, as our exploration of this remarkable civilization comes to its end, we can perhaps appreciate both the harshness and the magnificence of the Mongol achievement. They created an empire that was built on the foundation of individual hardship and collective discipline, but which ultimately produced a level of luxury, cultural sophistication, and international exchange that wouldn't be seen again for centuries. The tent thrones of the great Khans represented more than just personal luxury. They were symbols of a new kind of empire, one that could unite diverse populations while respecting their traditions, that could project power across vast distances while maintaining the mobility that was the source of its strength. It was an achievement that grew from the harsh realities of steppe life, but ultimately transcended those origins to create something entirely new in human history. As our journey through the vast Mongol world draws to its gentle close, let your mind rest for a moment on the extraordinary distance we have traveled together, not just across the steppes of Mongolia or through the centuries of time, but through the full spectrum of human experience that this remarkable empire contained. We began in the pre-dawn darkness of a warrior's tent, feeling the bite of cold air and tasting the sour tang of fermented mare's milk. We experienced the harsh discipline of constant movement, the intimate bond between warrior and horse, the relentless demands of survival in one of the world's most challenging environments. That world of hardship and endurance, of loyalty forged in suffering and brotherhood, tested by death, was the foundation upon which everything else was built. From those humble and harsh beginnings, we followed the remarkable transformation of Temujin, a boy abandoned to starve on the frozen steppe, who became Genghis Khan, the universal ruler whose vision united fractious tribes into the largest land empire in human history. His journey from outcast to conqueror reminds us that history is shaped not just by grand forces and inevitable trends, but by individual will, intelligence, and an almost incomprehensible capacity for endurance. We explored the mysteries that still surround this empire, the secret history that preserves the authentic voice of the Mongols themselves, the archaeological discoveries that continue to reveal the sophistication of their civilization, the genetic legacy written in the DNA of millions of people across continents. These mysteries remind us that the past is never truly past, that each generation discovers new aspects of history that speak to their own concerns and understanding. Finally, we entered the magnificent world of the great Khan's court, where luxury beyond imagination existed alongside the continuation of ancient traditions, where the wealth of continents flowed together to create something entirely new in human experience. The contrast between the common warrior's felt tent and the Khan's silk pavilion was vast. Yet both were fundamentally Mongol, both part of the same cultural tradition that valued mobility, adaptability, and the fierce independence of the steppe peoples. Perhaps what is most remarkable about the Mongol achievement is how it encompassed such extremes while maintaining its essential character. An empire that stretched from Korea to Hungary, that included Chinese scholars and European knights, Persian artists and Indian merchants, remained fundamentally true to the traditions of the Asian steppes. The Ger of the Great Khan was larger, more elaborate, and filled with treasures, but it was still a Ger, still a nomad's dwelling, still capable of being packed up and moved when the seasons or circumstances demanded. This adaptability was perhaps the secret of Mongol success. They could absorb the administrative techniques of Chinese bureaucrats, while maintaining the military traditions of steppe warriors. They could appreciate the artistic achievements of Persian craftsmen, while preserving the oral poetry of their own ancestors. They could govern settled populations of millions, while never losing their essential identity as people of the horse and the endless grassland. The legacy of the Mongol Empire extends far beyond the boundaries of their conquests or the duration of their rule. They created the first truly global empire, connecting east and west in ways that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. The trade routes they protected and promoted carried not just goods but ideas, technologies, and cultural influences that shaped the development of civilizations across 3 continents. They pioneered forms of religious tolerance and cultural inclusiveness that were centuries ahead of their time. They created administrative systems that balanced central authority with local autonomy, allowing diverse populations to maintain their identities while participating in a larger imperial structure. They demonstrated that nomadic peoples could create sophisticated civilizations that rivaled any produced by settled societies. The Mongol approach to warfare revolutionized military thinking, introducing concepts of mobility, coordination, and psychological warfare that influenced military doctrine for centuries. Their communication systems, built around networks of horse relays, created the fastest long-distance communication system the world had ever seen. Their diplomatic practices established precedents for international relations that continue to influence how nations interact with each other. But perhaps most importantly, the Mongol Empire demonstrated the extraordinary range of human adaptability and achievement. From the harsh survival skills of the steppe warrior to the sophisticated cultural synthesis of the imperial court, the Mongols showed that human beings could not only survive but thrive in environments and circumstances that seemed to offer only hardship and limitation. The genetic studies that trace Mongol influence across modern populations remind us that this empire was not just a political or military phenomenon, but a deeply human one. The lives we have explored tonight, the suffering warrior, the ambitious Khan, the scholarly translator, the powerful empress, these were real people whose choices and actions continue to influence the world we live in today. As you settle into sleep, perhaps you can carry with you some sense of the vast scope of human experience that the Mongol Empire represented. In a world that often seems divided between different cultures, religions, and ways of life, the Mongols demonstrated that it was possible to create unity while respecting diversity, to build power while maintaining traditions, to adapt to changing circumstances while preserving essential values. The wind that blows across the steppes of Mongolia tonight carries the same scents and sounds that surrounded the warriors and Khans we have met in our journey. The stars that wheel overhead shine with the same light that guided Mongol armies across continents and helped shamans divine the will of the eternal blue sky. The rhythms of the seasons that move the herds from pasture to pasture continue the cycles that have sustained the peoples of the steppe for thousands of years. In the quiet darkness of night, the vast distances of the steppe seem to compress time as well as space. The hardships and triumphs, the poverty and luxury, the mystery and revelation that we have experienced together become part of a larger pattern of human striving that continues in every generation. The courage of the warrior facing death on a frozen battlefield, the vision of the leader who saw possibility where others saw only chaos, the patience of the scholar preserving knowledge for future generations. These are not just historical curiosities, but enduring aspects of human nature. The Mongol Empire rose from the grass and eventually returned to it, but its influence on human civilization was permanent. In the genetic inheritance of populations across continents, in the trade routes that connected distant cultures, in the administrative innovations that influenced later empires, in the cultural syntheses that enriched art and learning, the echoes of that remarkable achievement continue to resonate. As you drift towards sleep, let your mind rest on the image of the eternal steppe, vast, peaceful, and enduring. Under that enormous sky, generations of peoples have found their place in the great patterns of history. Tonight, in the comfort of your own bed, surrounded by the security and warmth that our modern world provides, you can appreciate both the hardships those peoples endured and the remarkable achievements they accomplished. The stories we have shared tonight remind us that history is not just a collection of dates and events, but a continuous human drama of survival, ambition, love, loss, and the endless search for meaning and purpose. In the rise and fall of empires, in the struggles of individuals to shape their destinies, in the slow accumulation of knowledge and wisdom across generations, we see reflections of our own lives and challenges. Rest now, knowing that you have traveled far tonight, across centuries and continents, through hardship and luxury, mystery and revelation. The world of the Mongols, with all its complexity and contradiction, has shared its secrets with you. In your dreams, perhaps you will ride across endless grasslands, under infinite skies, feeling the rhythm of hoofbeats that once carried the thunder of empire across the world. Sleep well, traveler of time and space. The journey is complete, but the echoes of those distant voices will remain with you, whispering their stories of courage, endurance, and the endless human capacity to transform the world through wisdom and the bonds that unite us across all boundaries of time and space.